Hey, it's Chad Brown. Welcome to Disability Expert Podcast, where we talk all things Social Security disability. Back with Aaron Dalton.
Glad to be back.
We told him
Let's
we were
get
coming
into it.
back. We told him we were coming back with real life RFC examples. We did not lie to you. We are back today. If you did not see our last episode, it's a breakdown of what the RFC, or your residual function capacity, which is probably the most important thing a judge decides in your Social Security disability case. That last episode sort of went through that, talked about what RFC was, looks at the components of it, talked a little bit about how it fits into your case. But today we're going to go sort of into real practice of law. We're going to look at some real clients, at least fictional real clients. And the fact this could be anybody, right? But we're going to look at some real cases and look at how certain types of limitations impact people and how those gets translated into the RFC. So let's talk about a physical case. And by physical case, we're talking about one where there are primarily physical limitations. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to give us sort of an illustrative client.
Okay.
This is not a client that we've had.
It's a hypothetical
It's a
individual.
hypothetical individual. That's a different. Yeah, if you've never been in a disability hearing, you don't understand, like the judge, a hypothetical individual, and then they give an RFC. So it's sort of relevant, but not what we're talking about today. We're going to have 54-year-old male construction worker supervisor doing medium to heavy work. He had an L45, L5, S1, had 2-level disc herniation, had a laminectomy, has residual lower extremity radiculopathy. Basically, he has numbness in his leg. And he also has a partial right rotator cuff tear under conservative management.
Okay.
You got the facts?
I got it.
Okay, so let's just sort of break through and talk about what we're dealing with here. So in an orthopedic case, you have someone who has a back injury. So how does like a back injury play into exertional limitations? Like what type of things would you reasonably think someone with a back injury is going to struggle with just in exertional limitations? Sit, stand, walk, push, pull, carry, lift.
A lot of times with back limitations, we do see issues both with sitting and with standing.
Correct.
So typically when I'm talking to a client with a lumbar especially issue, the question is, how long can you sit before you need to get up because it hurts too bad? And when we talk about sitting in this RFC, we're talking about sitting upright like we're doing now.
Right.
We're not talking about sitting at home and the lazy boy with the feet kicked up.
Watching Breaking Bad or something.
Right.
Yeah.
Sitting upright. And typically after about 15, 20, 30 minutes, that's going to start to be painful. And I'm going to hear, oh, I've got to get up and I've got to move around.
Right.
And so then, okay, opposite question. How long can you stand for?
Right.
And varying answers, but typically there's a limit before that pain starts shooting down the leg.
Right.
And then same thing with walking. And so what I'm trying to piece together there is, are we looking at somebody that's going to have problems if they're asked to stand at a workstation like a cashier might do?
Right.
Would this person have problems walking like a retail sales associate might do?
So when you're doing your assessment, and we'll call him Builder Bob.
Builder Bob. Bob the Builder.
Bob the Builder. You didn't violate any rules there, I think, by deciding the show, Bob, which is cool. My kids like Bob the Builder when they were little. I've watched a lot of episodes. I don't know how that relates. I don't think I ever saw him lift anything. But Bob the Builder comes in, and he's had this back surgery. One of the first things you're going to do is intuitively, you're going to realize this is a heavy job, most likely.
Yes.
He's a manager, so maybe it's medium, but it's very rare going to be in the construction industry. So you've already placed him in an exertional category before you ever talked to him. I mean, once you saw his job, we knew when he came in as a lead what his exertional category was likely going to be. And then you're going to start to go, okay, I know that in that exertional category, he's going to be required to lift 50 pounds. Now, whether he has to lift up to 100 or more than 100. Now we're getting into, is it heavy or very heavy work, depending on whether he was maybe a steel framing contractor, or was he just sort of a finish carpenter or whatever it was. But generally, we know there's going to be a 50-pound lifting requirement. So when you're asking him about and he's going to have to stand 6 hours, very little sitting in those jobs.
Lots of walking.
Lots of walking. So you got lots of walking, lots of standing, very little sitting. So immediately you're running to, okay, I need to know how much he can stand, right? If you look at sort of the golden chain of evidentiary progression, what you're saying is, okay, we have a diagnosis of L5S1, herniated disc. We know that we're asking what his symptoms are. We know he has radiculopathy. We also are looking at records going, okay, does he have pain? Does he have limitations of function? Does he have medication side effects or whatever it is. So, and then we're trying to figure out, okay, how are we going to create an exertional limitation? And so you might immediately go and say, probably can't do the lifting.
Right. That's
So we're probably out with lifting, reasonably probably out with standing. Standing typically with low back pains is more problematic than walking.
right.
So we're like, okay, we got him out of walking. I mean, probably got him out of standing. We've probably got him out of lifting. Push, pull, carry, lift. I don't know. It just depends. We're going to most likely say, hey, probably can't do the lifting. Probably has a medical restriction from doing the lifting.
Right.
Okay, that's strong. So we got 3 exertional activities that probably can't be done at the prior work level. It's not that we're not going to build more, but trying to help people understand this is what we're doing in engaging an RFC. We're trying to project or predict what the RFC, the judge, should reasonably come up with. And here we're very quickly out of the lifting, the standing, and possibly the walking, where sitting's not really relevant. So you sort of look at those factors, say, okay, we've taken him out of those exertionally. But then you're going to go to additional factors, right? So then you're going to look at he's got a shoulder issue, so maybe that's going to be a reaching problem which is a postural, which is a non-exertional but still orthopedic. What about other possible non-exertional, non-mental? What other sort of comes to mind when you're talking to him?
We could be looking at stooping or crouching.
Right.
Is he going to have a hard time sort of getting down?
Right.
Cane use is a big one. When I see a low back, especially with a surgery, I want to know, do you have to use a cane? What circumstances do you have to? Is the cane prescribed? Lots of questions about the cane.
Right. And then you got environmental,
and environmental.
because he's a construction worker. So can he climb ladders? Can he be on scaffolds? Can he be in an open environment where it's dangerous? Real questions, right?
Especially with radiculopathy, maybe depending on how severe that numbness is, we might not want him around moving mechanical parts. There could be a risk of injury there.
Right. So you're looking at the person going, okay, well, they certainly have in past, because remember, RFC step 4 and step 5, we've really done a lot of step 4 analysis right here. We've got exertional problems. We've got some non-exertional postural, environmental problems. What about mental? What sort of things are you inquiring about? Are you worried about there?
Do we have a pain medication regimen that's causing drowsiness? Does the pain itself cause difficulty focusing or staying on task? Those two come up a lot, even in what would otherwise look like a solely physical
Yeah,
case.
and in that respect, what you're doing is saying, okay, this person has pain. The pain impacts their ability to concentrate. Well, that's a big deal if you're in a 2-man job and you're helping, move a beam that weighs 200 pounds, and like if it falls, someone gets hurt. Like you can't just say, "Oh, I wasn't paying attention there."
Oops, my bad.
Yeah, that doesn't work. And so, I think in step 4, you're looking at this case going, "Okay, this is strong. There's no reason to think he can do heavy work. There's no reason he can do very heavy work. There's no reason he can do medium work." Almost impossible to classify this job as a construction supervisor as light. I mean, I guess theoretically you might could, but by and large, it's not going to. So we feel good at step 4. What are we doing at step 5 though? Because just getting out of past relevant work is not going to win his case. So what are you going to what sort of deeper level assessment, either exertional or other limitations, are you going to be looking at to sort of get him through step 5 and get him across the finish line so he knows to win his case?
So at step 5 here, since he's over 50, we have to talk about the grids. Grids episode
Yeah,
pending,
grids episode
but
coming,
just be aware that there are rules that take into account age, education, work experience,
And the RFC.
and the RFC.
Right.
And so since he's 54, I know that if I can get him down to sedentary work and he can't go back to his past job, we're probably going to win his case under the grid rules.
Yeah, he's going to grid out.
he's going to grit out.
He's going to grit out.
Now, if I'm looking at his file and we're at the hearing, I'm assuming the state agency did not grid him out, so they
Right.
probably put him at light.
Right.
So I'm looking at that file saying, okay, what can we convincingly argue to the judge to get him from the light that the state agency used to deny his case down to sedentary where we can win?
Yeah, and so at that point, now we're saying, okay, let's look at standing and walking. Like
Yes.
sitting really becomes irrelevant if he can do a sitting job, and he's unlikely to have transferable work skills. That's another whole episode. So we're really looking at standing and walking, trying to get him below. Now you go back and have to understand the exertional category. So in a light exertional category, you're going to have to be able to stand or walk for 6 hours.
Yes.
So that's probably one of the immediate points of attack. We're going to say he can't meet the standing or walking requirements of light work. Therefore, he needs to be at sedentary.
Yes.
The fact that he can't do sitting either is irrelevant.
Yes.
So I think that next one legitimately is lifting. You have to be able to lift up to 20 pounds to do light work. Someone with a severe back injury may very well have a lifting restriction under 20 pounds. He might be lifting to the limiting 10 pounds or 15 pounds. If the evidence is not there, specifically his doctor hasn't given the limitation, what sorts of questions are you going to be working through with him to get him to sort of produce the evidence that we need in terms of testimony to get him below that 20-pound threshold?
I am looking at activities of daily living. Are there chores around the house that he used to do that now he can't, or that he can only do for a set period of time? So, how long can you wash dishes or vacuum before you need a break? I'm also asking, are you taking naps during the day now and you didn't used to? Are you having to sit with your feet elevated?
Right.
Because that can also play into it and say, well, if you're going to make this guy stand 6 hours a day, he's going to have to spend 2 hours in the middle
Right.
laying down with his feet up just
Right.
to make it through the second half of the workday, and that obviously is not
Yeah,
competitive.
and then it's sort of once again working through the limitations. So you start with exertional, what can you not do that you used to do? Well, I used to be the one that brought the groceries in, but now I can't lift the 25-pound 20-pound bag of dog food or whatever. It hurts me. I can't lift the 2 containers of drinks that we bring in. My child I just had a new grandchild, and I'm we've all agreed it's not safe for me to pick up this 12-pound child or whatever it is. So you're looking for real life ADLs, and then you're going to work through the same as well, posturals, and then looking at, I think, attacking concentration and attendance, which are going to fall typically under sort of mental or cognitive, because all jobs require you to have a pretty significant level of concentration, and all jobs require you to have attendance. So it's not uncommon that someone like this scenario might say, well, I can do activity.
Right.
Like I still ride mow my little, half-acre yard. I still go out and do some basic activities. And then you hear the but. Right. I'm going to be in a lot of pain the next day. So could I do a standing, walking job for one day? A lot of times someone like this might. He's at a very physically demanding job. Are you telling me, could I do this for one day? Yeah. Could I do it for 2? Maybe. Could I do it for 5 and then turn around and do it the next week? And then it's like, no, I'm not going to hold up. And so when you take our orthopedic case and you start to understand, we're going to start with exertional, work through, then we're going to look at non-exertional, then we're going to look at mental, and you're going to try to push him through the process. And in this case, I think you got a really good case that he's probably going to grit out at sedentary. We would probably start with an argument that he can't work at all due to attendance or concentration issues, but assuming he could overcome those hurdles, we're still going to run into the hurdle of he can't meet the exertional requirements of light. Put him at sedentary, and Builder Bob is now in disability.
Yep.
Very good. Let's look at a psych case. Let me give you some facts. We're going to do a psych-only case too. Usually there's a blend. We're going to do a psych-only case. 42-year-old female, semi-skilled billing clerk, major depressive disorder, general anxiety disorder, and PTSD from childhood trauma. Okay, very sort of common fact. One thing people understand is a lot of times childhood abuse will manifest itself in adults as mental health limitations. So if you look at our golden chain of evidentiary progression, we've got our diagnoses here. We've got major depressive, general anxiety disorder. We've got PTSD. And let's sort of push that forward a little bit. They're in psychiatric treatment. They're in counseling. They have issues with concentration. They have issues with energy levels. They have issues with sort of isolation, where they don't want to. She doesn't want to go out in public. She has issues with sleep disturbance. She has some flashback issues, and she has issues with certain age men. So 50 plus age men, she has a heightened sense of anxiety around them. What is Social Security going to do in terms of assessing her initially in terms of the Part B analysis and those 4 factors, and then how are we going to work through this case?
The first thing the judge is going to do is rate those Part B factors that we talked about in the last episode.
Right.
So typically, if we're at a hearing level, I'm assuming that we're probably looking at mild to moderate.
Right.
Usually, if somebody at the state agency has assigned marked or severe limitations,
Right.
then we don't get to the hearing.
Yeah, so let's look at that. So you have these 4 domains that are used either in step 2 or 3, depending on who the judge is and what they're doing, that are assessing the severity of sort of specific mental-like limitations. I won't spend a ton of time on this, but domain 1 is understanding, remembering, and applying information. 2 is interacting with others. 3 is ability to concentrate, persist, and maintain pace. And 4 is adapting or managing oneself. So in these 4 domains, they're going to look at her facts and say, for example, interacting with others. What sort of assessment might they make with respect to her interacting with others?
So we've talked about that she has some isolating issues, not wanting to go out in public. So that could be a moderate limitation.
Right.
In the RFC, that could look like, never interacting with the public. Maybe we're looking for jobs with only occasional or frequent coworker or supervisor interactions. Maybe no confrontational
Right.
jobs. You shouldn't be having to resolve, problems for people. We're looking at sort of basic level work here.
And if you look, for example, at concentration, persistence, and maintaining pace, what sort of issues might she have with that, and what might that look like in sort of a severity level assessment, whether it's mild or moderate or whatever it might be?
Typically with Social Security, they're trying to figure out, can you stay on track for about 2 hours at a time, the 2 hours in between breaks.
Right.
And so if their determination is you can stay on track for 2 hours, maybe we have a moderate limitation and you can keep that 2 hours of focus, but you don't need to be on time-based task. You don't need to be on an assembly line. You need to be able to somewhat work at your own pace within that 2 hours.
Right. So, and then they're going to look at understanding, remembering, applying information. They're going to look at adapting or managing themselves, which you could have some issues here. Sometimes people who have the inability to sort of manage their emotional state at work are going to have issues with attendance. So anyway, the point is they're going to give her a rating. Sometimes, a lot of times it's moderate. Sometimes it's mild, sometimes it's none. The thing I want people to understand though is this rating that they have in the 4 domains has to be translated into a functional limitation.
Yes.
But there's not like a scale. So one of the areas that I think is maybe most poorly defined by the Social Security Administration is, so what does it mean to have a moderate deficit in interacting with others? And it matters because the judge has to actually translate that into a functional limitation. Remember, we're doing an RFC. It's your residual functional capacity. And so there's open for interpretation there.
Yes.
So I think, so you're preparing for her case. How are you going to interact with her to say, okay, well, they've given you moderate in all 4 domains. So they think you have moderate deficits in interacting with others and understanding, applying information, and concentration, persistence, and pace, managing yourself. They're just conceding like you have a pretty significant level, moderate of impairment. How does that translate to the RFC in terms of case building and what you're doing to try to help her get on disability?
Activities of daily living are huge, especially in mental health only cases. So we are going to spend a lot of time talking about, what do the depressive episodes look like? Are there, is it 3 days a week that you're not able to get out of bed because the depression is so severe those days? Um, with the anxiety or PTSD, are there panic attacks? How often? What triggers those? Um, with the inability to be around men of a certain age, can you give me some examples of how that has limited you? And we're really going to dive into, what just how limiting is the combination of all of these things.
Right. So, for example, so in an RFC, for example, if this moderate deficit in understanding, remembering, and applying information might look like limited to simple, routine, repetitive task, right? So, the first thing you have to do when you're building these cases is understand the RFC is used at step 4 and 5. So, we would say, hey, she has a pretty significant limitation in remembering what she's supposed to do because she has a periodic flashback or she has periods where she's very tired because of the sleep disturbance.
Right.
Therefore, we need to limit her to a simple task. But her job was semi-skilled. She was a clerk doing medical transcription or whatever it was. I can't remember. And therefore, what you're trying to do is chip away at that and say, okay, she has non-exertional work demands that she can't meet because of her non-exertional limitations, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So, and then what you're doing is trying to work through and you really sort of chip away. Once again, saying, okay, she's going to have difficulty managing herself. She's going to have days where she can't get out of bed and work at all. We're going to be pushing for 3+ or more absences a month. It's nice if our psychiatrist would come along beside us.
Super helpful.
But it's even if the psychiatrist won't, it's very important that she's told her doctor. So she's in this weekly counseling or she's in monthly medication management, and they say, "How you're doing?" Well, I'm doing pretty well. Okay, except that you missed 4 days of work last month.
Right.
Right. And so you don't put the detail in, and now we're left without the evidence to translate into a real limitation where if you tell, if we have, we may even get in records from the employer, right? We get records that show that they have this history of absenteeism. And now we're able to come in and say, well, they have the diagnosis. They're saying that they have a symptom where they have isolation and they have fatigue. And we have actual records that show this. She's told her doctor she can't go to work. She has absent records. Therefore, we're saying, okay, this puts her below the ability to sustain competitive work because of absenteeism. And then the same with other factors. You're saying, okay, well, you have moderate deficits in concentration, persistence, and pace. Well, I'm distracted very easily, right? So now we're saying, okay, she can't complete her job tasks satisfactorily. So a lot of times in mental cases, what you're trying to do is look at the factors individually to eliminate core sort of job components, attendance, concentration,
time on task is
time
a
on,
big one.
yeah, how you interact with your coworkers. And so with her, what we're going to be doing is we're going to take these factors and build them. One, can we have a sort of a rifle shot that destroys the case and say, hey, well, I mean, she's missing work. She lost her job because she was missing work 10 times a month. And finally, they just got fed up with it, right? I mean, that's really compelling evidence. You still have to work backwards. The RFC has to work backwards from the limitation to the symptom to the diagnosis. And a lot of times we're building it the other way, but either way you look at it. But at another level, sometimes it's just not that clear. And so you're looking, saying, okay, well, they have difficulty staying on task, and they have a little bit of difficulty with attendance, and they have a little bit of difficulty with focus. And, how much is an employer going to tolerate?
Right. There's only so much.
Yeah. And so you're starting combining those, trying to get the cumulative effect, which is exactly what the RFC is supposed to do. The RFC is supposed to look at all of the factors combined to create this work ceiling for what they can do. And if that ceiling is below what's acceptable from a reasonable employer, then hopefully the vocational expert's going to testify that they're not going to be able to work, or they're going to get a letter from their doctor that sort of places these pieces together and lays the foundation for that RFC. So that's it, man.
All
So
right.
that's all we got. All right. So those are just some simple examples. A lot of cases have a blending of the RFC. You're going to have both mental, postural style limitations and mental cognitive limitations and exertional limitations. But the key for you to understand is if you're trying to get on disability, it's not just saying I hurt or I can't do this or I can't do that. It's about being able to not only put that chain of evidence together, but now you have to actually translate it into vocationally relevant Social Security style phrasing to get the judge to see why you're disabled under maybe the grid rules, or which we're going to do an episode.
Yes,
on.
grid rules pending.
Grid rules pending. Or you can get in a position where you can pose hypotheticals, or the judge can pose hypotheticals to the vocational expert where they say, like, no employer is going to tolerate this. Like, this is just not going to work. So there you go. That's it. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for watching. Please subscribe. Talk to you soon.